Well, it's been a while, but I've been kind of busy lately, and with the holidays, that doesn't help. However, the other day I was working on a couple laptops, and I thought, let me throw together a quick video just kind of comparing the two. Both are Dell XPS 9370s. One has an i5-8550U with 8 gigs of RAM, and the other has an i7-8550U with 16 gigs of RAM. Now, I would love to have the same RAM in both, however, you'd have to unsolder them from the board. You can't upgrade or easily upgrade the RAM in either one of these, so we're just going to go with what we can get and just see if the upgraded i7 model was worth it for the money, and if you're going to be buying one used, is it worth looking for the i7, or can you kind of save a few bucks and maybe just go with the i5? The i5 has a max turbo speed of 3.4 GHz with a base speed of 1.6. Both have 4 cores and 8 threads. However, the i5 only has 6 megs of smart cache, where the i7 has 8 megs. The i7 can turbo up to 4 GHz, and its base speed is 1.8. Now, the iGPUs are pretty much the same on each, with the i7 able to overclock its iGPU to 1.15 GHz, which is just 50 MHz more than the i5. Both have the same TDP, and they're both released at the same time. Now, one of the main problems with this model laptop, and you can see it all over the internet, people talking about it, is its thermal issues. Now, this one is sort of a parts unit. However, it still works. It's just been dropped, so there's some issues with the wireless and things like that, but it still works. There are different types of mods that you can find all over the internet that people have come up with. Some are just software where you just undervolt the CPU, and that can help not only battery life, but also to let it run a little bit cooler. These things will idle often around 50 degrees Celsius, idle at 50 degrees, and when you throw something at it, it can very quickly just jump right up to 100, and then it starts to thermal throttle. So the thermals on these, not that great. The other thing apparently people like to do is they like to use thermal pads, and they put them all over the heat pipes, over the VRMs, and have them press against the bottom cover. The problem is, there's not much to this. I think this is actually just plastic, so I'm not sure how much that's actually going to help. I have done it with another laptop that had a metal bottom cover, and it helped a little bit. If anything, it just added more, I think it just added more force to the heatsink pressing up against the CPU. But it's not going to be a night and day difference. It's pretty much one of those every little bit you can get type of things. However, if you just need something to search the web, do some work on, and maybe watch YouTube, then yeah, one of these does just fine. Also, I know these look different. This one just has one of those vinyl or rubber covers glued to it, and I'm not going to pull it off to make them look the same. But they are the same laptops. So, first up, let's take a look at Passmark. The CPU benchmarks are very similar across the board. However, the i7 does pull ahead very slightly in all tests. What would be nice is if we could clock them the same and see how they all perform. I believe the only real difference here between the two is the clock speeds and really the additional cache. Memory tests show the i7 pulling ahead quite a bit. However, being that they have different amounts of memory, I'm not sure, and I didn't really look to see if they use the same speed memory chips. When benchmarking, I usually will use the same RAM between each board, but obviously I can't do that here, and this is more to see if paying for the i7 model was really worth it. Now, the folder I use to benchmark 7-zip is a folder filled with drivers for a netbook I own. The folder is over 1 gig in size and has nearly 1,700 files, so I always thought of that as a good way, to benchmark 7-zip. Here, we see they performed about the same, with the i5 finishing about 20 seconds after the i7. Now again, this is with a ton of tiny files, so simply zipping up a few files in a folder to email or something like that, you would probably never even notice a difference. In Cinebench, first I performed the single-threaded bench, and you could see the i7 really pulled ahead, finishing over a minute and a half sooner. This is most likely since it can clock itself up to 4 GHz with only one core. In the multi-threaded test, you can see things were a lot closer. Cinebench is now using all cores, and the i7 can't clock quite as high. Because of that, the results are almost the same, with the i7 finishing about 12 seconds sooner. Now with Handbrake, I did 2 benchmarks, one with just CPU encoding and the other with QSV. This test was just CPU encoding, and as you can see, once again, they aren't too far off. The i7 finished about 35 seconds sooner, and in real-world use, you probably wouldn't even notice a difference after waiting 15 minutes for it to finish. A few seconds really is nothing. With the QSV test, the results, unfortunately, were about the same. The i7 finished about 40 seconds sooner, and once again, unless you need every little bit that you can get, this really wouldn't be a noticeable difference. I wouldn't recommend crypto mining on either of these. However, if you did, then yeah, this i7 would be preferable. The max hash rate is just under 1,000 hashes per second faster. One main reason for this is the additional cache in the i7. The The i5 performed best mining on only 3 of its cores, while the i7 could use all 4. In Ycruncher, the i7 finished about 10 seconds sooner than the i5, so there is additional processing power to be had, but it's mostly due to the additional cache and higher clocks. I didn't do any real gaming on these because they really only have a crappy iGPU. However, I did run Heaven and Superposition. In Heaven, they performed about the same. Again, remember the i7's iGPU can only clock about, 50 megahertz faster? Yes, the i7 benched about 1.3 FPS faster, but here they look about the same, with the i7 being ever so slightly smoother, if you even want to call it that. In Superposition, it was a mess. The audio is messed up and neither reached anywhere close to 10 FPS. The i7 once again performed better, but only by about 1 FPS. Now, when I put the graphs together, I like to have something, to compare the results against. I used the results from a recent video where I benched some Skylake CPUs. I figured the desktop Skylake CPU, although older, would still perform far better than either of these more recent laptop CPUs. However, as you can see, these Kaby Lake CPUs could hold their own. The results in 7-zip are nearly identical between them. In Handbrake, well, yeah, the desktop CPUs did far better, but the single-core Cinebench run shows them all within the same ballpark, and the i7 Kaby Lake being nearly the same as the i5 desktop Skylake. In Superposition, they all performed about the same, again, not great or even good, but this i7 performed better than the Skylake i7. And in Heaven, yes, it was no contest. I wanted to run some games on these, even simple ones, but I didn't have the space on the SSD and didn't want to be installing and uninstalling constantly. But I think we can see that if you are looking at buying some of these used, go for what you can afford and with which one has the most RAM. Don't worry too much about the CPU because, as you can see, they both performed about the same. As always, if you made it this far, thanks, and let me know what you think down in the comments. I hope everyone had a great holiday, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.